By the time the H-Block hunger strike was called off in October 1981, 10 coffins had been carried out of the gates of the Maze prison. In spite of the most intensive international pressure, the British government had refused to concede on prison conditions. 10 Irishmen had starved themselves to death in protest. The political fallout set off a chain reaction felt to this day. Sinn Féin emerged from the shadows. Owen Carron, Member of Parliament for Manor, South Tyrone. Gerry Adams, Member of Parliament, West Belfast. Their electoral success mounted, all based on a political ideology that had changed little since 1916. Ireland united, Ireland free, Brits out. The men and women of the Easter Rising had driven Britain out of most of Ireland. These grim-faced men were determined to complete that sacred task. Some had been blooded on active service with the IRA. Many had been interned or had served long prison sentences for their crimes. But now they were politicians, with an Armalite in one hand and a ballot paper in the other. In June '83, Sinn Féin President Gerry Adams travelled to London as the newly elected member for West Belfast. Now, republicanism had a legitimate voice in British politics. With the support of some left-wing Labour MPs, Adams was determined to use it. Westminster was worried. Until then, militant republicanism could be dismissed as a lunatic fringe. Now, if he chose, Adams could take his seat in the British Parliament. Worried too, the SDLP, who since 1970 had scooped up the majority of Catholic votes. They too were pursuing the goal of a united Ireland, but by consent. Party leader John Hume decided to act. Violence would have no place in his new Ireland. Equally alarmed by Sinn Féin electoral successes were the political parties in the Republic of Ireland. They backed the Hume initiative. A political forum was called to debate the options for a new Ireland. The Unionists were invited. They declined. Nationalists, North and South, agreed that the Dublin government should be given a say in the day-to-day running of Northern Ireland. The Irish Prime Minister, Garret Fitzgerald, was anxious to give a voice to rebellious Northern nationalists. SDLP leader John Hume hoped to stem the rising Republican tide. The report, with 3 agreed options, was submitted to the British Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher. Her response was unsympathetic and seen by many in Ireland as high-handed, even arrogant.
Unified Ireland was one solution, that is out. A second solution was a confederation of 2 states, that is out. A third solution was joint authority, that is out. That is a derogation from sovereignty. We made that quite clear when the report was published. Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom.
But events close to home had already begun to persuade Mrs. Thatcher of the wisdom of Dublin involvement. In October 1984, the IRA bombed the Conservative Party conference in Brighton. 5 people were killed, and the Prime Minister herself narrowly escaped injury. It was decided if Dublin agreed to cooperate on security, London would negotiate on sovereignty. After lengthy discussions, the 2 Prime Ministers signed the Anglo-Irish Agreement in November 1985. The treaty, lodged at the United Nations, gave the Republic a say in Northern Ireland affairs for the first time since partition in 1921. The Irish government, too, was prepared to make significant concessions. To the amazement of both governments, the Unionists said no. Injured by their exclusion from the negotiations, fearful of the new influence of Dublin and their affairs, and feeling a deep sense of betrayal by London, Belfast City Hall became the focus once again for loyalist protest. A new threat, a new Carson.
Let it be said loudly and clearly that this is not the battle of Jim Molyneux or Ian Paisley, the battle of the Unionist family. This is the battle of the loyalist people of the whole of Ulster.
With the enemy at the door once again, Unionist divisions were set aside. In front of the United Nations, Dr. Fitzgerald again extended the hand of friendship.
I would like to avail myself of this solemn occasion, addressing the nations of the world here today, to pledge to one group in particular, the Unionists of Northern Ireland, that in these Anglo-Irish discussions, the Irish government have no desire to seek any relationship that does not fully respect their identity, their ethos, and their way of life. The purpose of all our actions has been to achieve peace and stability, the absence of which has created for many in both communities a sense of being under threat for years past. That threat, expressed in a most vicious form by acts of terrorism directed relentlessly against the Unionist community, must be ended by the combined political action of all in Ireland and in Britain who have power to influence events.
Loyal Ulster still said no, and from factories and farms they marched in protest. On the outskirts of Belfast, where Dublin's civil servants had been housed, there was trouble. Behind the gates, police, many sharing the anger of the demonstrators, faced the wrath of former friends and neighbours. Events were beginning to leave Unionists floundering in their wake. Less than a mile away, Irish ministers were arriving to reopen discussions. Democracy at work behind barbed wire. The people of Northern Ireland could not agree. The two sovereign governments would now try. Undisturbed and unmolested by unruly Unionists. Inside Stormont Castle, the men behind the wire got down to business. Issues of mutual concern, matters of mutual interest. An Irish foreign minister in the corridors once stalked by Unionist prime ministers. The handshakes were tentative.
Okay. And you've had it. All right. Thank you very much.
The experiment could go dreadfully wrong. Beyond the wire, angry Unionists. Their bitterness directed as much at the police as those they protected.
In the name of the Unionist majority, whose rights you have trampled in the gutter, we repudiate you. The sordid exercise in which you're involved is the very antithesis of democracy.
The overture to 4 years of resistance to the hated Anglo-Irish agreement. Days of action, peaceful protest, and violent reaction. Under the banner of Ulster Says No, a sullen anger was bubbling. On the streets, the RUC, an almost exclusively Protestant police force, was caught in the middle. Charged with the task of policing unpopular policies within their own community, they became increasingly friendless and beleaguered. When a traditional Orange March in Portadown was rerouted away from Catholic areas for the first time, it was presumed that Dublin had a hand in the decision-making. Loyalists turned on the police, once their police, now the puppets of Dublin and London. worse was to come. Vilified by day, the night brought no respite. Policemen's homes were attacked and burned. The messenger was being punished for the message. Unwelcome now in either community, policemen and their families found themselves with nowhere to go. Some moved behind the barbed wire of army camps. Others quit. The rest rode out the storm as best they could. The Northern Ireland Assembly, a talking shop dominated by unionists and tolerated by the British government as a safety valve for their anger. But no longer. The Anglo-Irish agreement and its own incompetence had made it irrelevant. Inside, elected members hung on to the fading remnants of local control. Outside, their supporters prepared for yet another assault on the Union and their vision of Protestant authority in a Protestant Ulster. The police once again stood uneasily in the middle. The bad news came by letter. The Speaker broke the news.
The effect of this is that the Northern Ireland Assembly is now...
Meantime, the bomb and the gun were redefining the agenda. The IRA had cultivated allies wherever they could be found. The enemy of my enemy would be my friend. In 1987, the Excellent, loaded with arms from a friendly Libya, was intercepted in French waters. Tons of arms and explosives were offloaded. But other shipments had evaded customs and coast guard. The most sophisticated terrorist organization in Europe was arming for conflict. The new arsenals were used to devastating effect. The security forces responded. Informants were cultivated and intelligence information was at a premium. A secret war was underway. Loughgall, County Armagh, May 87. Information about an IRA attack on the police station had been passed on. Special units lay in wait. 8 IRA men and an innocent passer-by were shot dead. Fire was being met with fire. Remembrance has always lain deep in the Protestant culture. Service and sacrifice in war. King, Queen and country. Ypres, the Somme, Passchendaele. Irish regiments, Ulster divisions in line. The Ulster Rifles, the Irish Guards, the Enniskillings. Remembrance Day, Enniskillen, November 1987. An IRA bomb left 10 dead. Gordon Wilson, a shopkeeper, and his daughter Mary, a nurse, were buried in the rubble.
And then I was aware of somebody squeezing my hand. And Mary said, "Is that you, Dad?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Are you all right?" I said, "Yes, but my hand's sore. How are you, dear?" "All right." Then I heard her scream. Asked her again, "How are you, Mary? Are you all right?" "Yes." She was gripping my hand very tightly. I was bleeding from the forehead. Knew I'd hurt myself. But I was as assured that she was all right. She told me twice. She told me again, but she still was screaming in between times, and I couldn't understand why on the one hand she was telling me she was all right, on the other hand she was screaming. When I asked her for the 4th or 5th time, she said, "Daddy, I love you very much." Those were the last words she spoke. I shall never forget them.
Mary Wilson died where she lay. Her father's words of forgiveness for her killers undoubtedly saved other innocent lives. Enniskillen had its day of remembrance. 11 more names were added to the roll of honor. The IRA massacre was condemned throughout the world. The British government was resolute. The terrorists would not be allowed victory. Honour and authority were at stake. Britain would not be bullied. But the price was high. Terrorist suspects were now being shot dead when they could have been as easily arrested. As the evidence mounted, the question was asked, is there an official shoot-to-kill policy? Amid international uproar, Manchester's Deputy Chief Constable John Stalker was sent in to investigate. It was an embarrassing episode for the RUC. Faced with hostility towards his inquiries and convenient lapses of memory, Stalker was withdrawn in controversial circumstances. Controversial, too, were the events of March 1988 in Gibraltar. 3 members of the IRA shot dead by a British Army undercover squad. They had planned a bombing on a military parade on the Rock, but were unarmed at the time of their deaths. Why were they not arrested and tried? Their funerals, back in Belfast, amid Catholic disquiet, were to start a chain reaction which was to prove uniquely horrific. As the bodies of the Gibraltar terrorists were being buried, a lone loyalist attacked the mourners with hand grenades and a pistol. 3 men died. The gunman was arrested, but in some extreme loyalist quarters is still being hailed as a hero. Those West Belfast funerals took place in an atmosphere of fear and near hysteria. Another similar attack was expected. By the cruelest of fates, a car occupied by 2 British soldiers in plain clothes strayed into the path of the cortege. Suspecting another loyalist attack, the Republican crowd dragged the 2 soldiers from the car. They were stripped, badly beaten, and shot dead by IRA gunmen.